All right, everybody, here we go. This is the very first cinematography fact or fiction, and we are starting off with a bang. This is a hotly debated topic in filmmaking circles, and it is, should cinematographers own their own gear? And to kick it all off, we're going to be looking at a few of the various arguments out there for people against owning your own gear. So let's dive straight into it. Let's go. Okay, number one, should cinematographers own gear? No. No is the easiest answer, and it's the answer that you'll hear most often, especially from older, more experienced cinematographers who may, in fact, spoiler alert, who may own gear themselves, will say no, you don't want to own gear as a cinematographer. And it's the easiest answer because a lot of the times you're getting asked by someone who may not have as much experience in the filmmaking world and cinematography world, and there's a lot of pitfalls with owning your own gear and buying gear in general. The reason that a lot of cinematographers say no to people, that they shouldn't own gear, is because it's nuanced, it's tricky. The answer yes leads to a whole different discussion, and you have to have a whole understanding of what goes along with owning gear. So the easiest answer, if some random just comes up to you, is no. No, you shouldn't own gear, because people early on in their career think that if they own gear, they will get more work. And that is not the way that you want to think about things. You want all the gear that you have, if you do decide to purchase your own gear, to be a value add, to add on to something. You should already be getting work as a cinematographer for your technical and creative skills. The gear is just an added bonus. That's why you often find people saying no to this question, because it's nuanced. Saying yes is a whole different discussion. It's going to take a whole lot longer to explain exactly what you mean and how you go about doing it effectively. Whereas if you just say no, that works too. You definitely don't need to have gear to be a professional cinematographer. All right, now let's take a look at number two, the second most popular argument for people saying that you should not own your own gear if you're a cinematographer. And that is that having your own gear will bias your judgment when it comes to jobs in the future. So you're gonna, if you have a certain set of lenses, you're gonna want to use those lenses on every single job because you bought them. The crazy part about this one is this is probably the most insulting, to think that just because you own gear, if you're a professional cinematographer, that you would sabotage an entire production just to make a couple of extra dollars is ridiculous. Just because you own gear doesn't mean you have to use it on every single job. If you're doing it correctly, you're purchasing gear that you use quite often. It's not that it has to be on every single job. So you still have, or you should have, if you're not 6 years old, the ability and the maturity to judge a project on a project by project basis and what the gear requirements are for that. And then if you don't have that piece of equipment, you just rent it. There is nothing that is stopping you from renting if you own your own gear. It just makes it easier if you do come across a project that does require the gear that you have. You already have access to it, plus you get the added bonus of making more income that way. So this one, I don't quite follow. I don't believe in it at all. I think if your judgment is skewed by owning a piece of gear, you've got other questions that you should probably be answering. Besides, is it a smart idea to invest? It's probably, are you a good human being or not? And are you a good cinematographer or not? Because you have to tackle each job on a project by project basis. There's going to be times where maybe your specific set of lenses won't work, and you have to make a mature and educated call and saying, no, I'm going to forego this return on investment for the betterment of the project, because that's long-term thinking. Yeah, if you use your lenses and it doesn't look quite right, you'll get the rental fee for that job, but think about your work going forward. Cinematography is a long game. The director, the production company, you want them to be happy with the results that they're getting, with the relationship that you're able to build. This is a relationship business. So you want to make it as smooth and as worry-free and as trouble-free as possible for those individuals. And that's how you're going to get more work. So it may not be right for this job. Maybe you don't get your lenses or your camera or whatever it is on that particular job, but you do a great job. And then there's more opportunities in the future to get your gear on. So it's long-term thinking versus very short-term, narrow thinking. All right, let's keep things moving. This is number three. And this one is, every job is different and unique, and the equipment that you're going to use is unique to those jobs. While that is true to a certain extent, and every job that comes in, you should be looking at with a clean perspective and a fresh perspective and going, okay, what do we need? What equipment do we need to make this thing possible? But in the real world, a lot of the equipment, no matter what the end goal is, there is a lot of equipment, especially in camera, where you're going to use the same tools over and over again. For example, you're going to need a fluid head. You're going to need a set of legs. You're going to need a camera. You're going to need a follow focus. You're going to need monitors. You're going to need wireless video capabilities. All those things, they don't really play into the overall look of things, right? So it doesn't change that much. Yeah, sure, cameras change quite often, once every 3 or 4 years at the highest end, or whatever category you're in, right? If you're in a lower tier thing, those lower tier cameras, really they're changing, the mainstays are changing once every 2-3 years. At the higher end, it's once every 3 to 4 years. It's not that rapid, and it's not that varied. In the commercial world, really one camera dominates the commercial market. You don't have to go out on a limb and guess which camera is going to make its money back. There's really one camera on 99% of all commercial sets. So I'm sure you can find that in your own niche at your own level. You know that equipment exists. And apart from that, the peripherals, if you're on a commercial set, you don't see 10 different brands of tripod heads. You see one fluid head brand, which is O'Connor. You see the 2575D on every commercial set across the world. It doesn't really change that much from job to job. The things that do change, lenses change quite often, even though that doesn't mean you can't have your own set of lenses. That maybe, you shoot a particular thing and you look back at your calendar and you say, I shoot a lot of this clean style. I need these types of lenses. And then if you work outside of that, you can just rent, right? Like we talked about before. So yeah, each job is unique, but at the same time, there's a lot, I would say 95% of the gear that is used, that is on a production sheet before a shoot, all that gear, 95% of it is the same every single job. Okay, number 4 is the argument that gear is always changing, so it's very difficult to stay ahead of the curve and make your money back. And this one is really easy to debunk and really easy to shoot down because it's not changing that quickly. We talked just before about cameras. Yes, they change quite often. I would say 1 out of 3 years is not that bad. If you're not making your money back in a year or 2, you're in serious trouble. But it's not that quick. And fluid heads, matte boxes, monitors, filters, all those things, they don't really change that much. Maybe one item every 12 months will sneak its way into production, into the regular workflow. It doesn't really change that much. Once you get in on the normal production package at your level, whatever it is, whatever it's shooting low budget stuff or mid budget stuff or the highest of high, you're gonna find that it doesn't really change that much, right? It's not stagnant, but it is a very slow trickle to make it into the mainstream. And if you keep your eye on things and if you keep your finger on the pulse of what's happening with technology, you can stay ahead of that curve fairly easily. Okay, and that brings us to the last one that you'll often hear, which is people will say, well, I don't want to invest my money in gear because I can invest it in other spots and make more money or do something different outside of the industry, and I don't feel clogged down by all of this gear. I don't feel, you don't have to store it or get insurance for it. And sure, you can invest in other things, but if you're a cinematographer, as you climb the ranks, you start to see that the allocation of funds that is going out of what could potentially be your pocket into someone else's starts to add up really, really quickly. And you can make a great return on purchasing the right film gear, right? But it's the way that you go about it. It's what items you're selecting first, how you're purchasing those items. Those are all important. So yes, you can make money in other things, obviously, but you can make a great return in film gear, especially if you're a working cinematographer, because productions come to you and they say, we want this look. It's your job. Your entire day rate comes down to producing the results that people are after. So they come to you with a problem, you have solutions. And one of those solutions that you have to come up with is, where are we going to get the gear that is going to make this job possible? And if you have the gear yourself because you've identified, looking back, you say, okay, I used a lot of this gear over the past 12 months or whatever it is, and you purchase that gear and you just have it on hand, you can actually make a phenomenal return on film gear if you purchase wisely and you have the days to book that gear. And you don't have to do a whole lot of work. If you're a professional cinematographer, you should be keeping up to date with what is happening with gear anyway, right? A lot of people like to bash gear and looking into gear and studying gear and knowing what's happening in the gear world, but that only helps you tell your story or sell your product or shoot your commercial better, the more you can stay on top of gear. So you should be doing that anyway. The extra step here is that you're going, okay, is this smart to purchase from an economic standpoint? Will this make money back? There's nothing wrong with that. It's just that one extra step. So no, it's not significantly more work. Yeah, there are expenses along with it, but anytime you're going to generate income, there's going to be expenses. The difference is you're buying assets versus liabilities, which we're not going to get into here, but it is a great way to generate income if you have the work. Okay, so just quickly here, we're going to touch on how do you know if buying gear is right for you. This is a completely different video. It could be a giant long one, but for our sake here, I'm just going to come up with a quick, easy formula. For the next 12 months, keep a diary of every single shoot that you do. Keep a diary of all of the equipment that's on there, the rental price for all of that gear, and after 12 months, you're going to look back and you're going to start to see patterns. So what you want to do is you want to take those patterns and say, okay, if you only worked 20 days last year on set, you got 20 shoot days, you look at all the equipment, probably realistically, you're not going to make your money back. So you should be renting. If you start to get in that 25, 30 days a year, you're going to start to see that, wait a second, I did 30 days last year and I did 25 of those with the Alexa, or I did 25 of those with the Cook S4s, or 30 of them had a wireless transmitter and receiver. You can start to do the math and you look back and you say, okay, what are the patterns here? What do I use on every single job? I know I have filters, ND filters on every single job. I know that those cost $4,000 for a set and I can rent them out for $100 a day. You start to see that things are lining up and that you can actually make some money at this. So I would say, you know when it's time to buy gear, when you can look back and do the math and it adds up, right? Just keep a diary for 12 months. The longer, the better. But generally what will happen is after 12 months, you realize, hey, there are definitive patterns here. Like I've used the same camera every job. I've used the same monitor every job. I've used the same follow focus every single job. And that is where you want to start. Now it's tricky how to buy gear and how to get it onto productions. That's again for another video, but that's just a really simple formula. So hopefully it helped. Hopefully it gave you some insight. Let me know down in the comments below what you think. Do you think the cinematographers should own their own gear? Do you think they're not mature enough to have the ability to not get their gear on when it doesn't fit? Do you have gear? Anyway, okay, that's going to do it for this video. We'll see you in the next one.